Hello and welcome to 10-man normal Norushen, the third boss of the Siege of Orgrimmar, and another interesting fight. This is a more in-depth guide, and if you're just looking for a quick summary, check the description of this video. You will need 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, and 5 to 6 DPS. This seems to be quite a big DPS check, and you may need a 2 healer if you're having trouble with the Berserk timer. At the time of doing this, the timers are a bit off, and the enrage seems to be about 7 minutes, so keep that in mind. This fight is going to require more individual player awareness than the previous encounters, as not only will players have to pass tests, which we will go through later, but your group will have to deal with a corruption bar as well. Dealing with the corruption tests mechanic correctly will most likely be the difference between killing in time or not at all, as it was for us. Raid communication is really important in this fight as well, and will go a long way to helping you take down this boss. After you start the fight, there will be a time before the boss appears, which your boss mod should show you. Your group shouldn't be in combat during this, which means you can pre-pot quite easily. But enough of that, let's get going. As I said earlier, there is a corruption mechanic. All players start with 75 out of 100 points of corruption. Unlike many other corruption encounters, becoming fully corrupted will not mind control the player and force you to kill them. The higher a player's corruption, the less damage they do to the boss, and that's it. There is only one way to gain corruption, and it can and should be controlled, but that will be explained in a bit. The boss has several abilities. Unleashed Anger, which is a hard-hitting move used on the tank. They may want to use a cooldown for it. Tanks will also have to deal with a constant stacking debuff called Self-Doubt, which the boss will apply to the current tank. The more and more stacks the tanks get, the more damage Unleashed Anger will do, so as the stacks get higher, tanks will probably need to use some cooldowns for the attacks. Tanks will need to switch when their debuff falls off, provided they are not in a test. Blind Hatred creates a black skull that moves along the edge of the room with a beam connected to the boss. Get away from and stay away from the beam. It won't instantly kill you, but it deals such high damage that it will come pretty close to one-shotting you. If you absolutely need to get somewhere on the other side of the beam, either run around or pop some defensives and run through it as fast as you can. Possibly blink to the other side or use some other kind of movement ability. It deals damage while you're in it, so the less you touch it, the better. Nobody should ever need to touch the beam though, and it comes down to just paying attention to it. It does not seem to deal any damage as soon as it spawns, so you have time to get out of the way before it turns you into toothpaste. The boss will constantly be AoEing the entire raid with Icy Fear. The damage from this will increase as the boss's health gets lower. This damage will not carry over into the tests. At 50% health and every 10% health after 50, the boss will summon an ad. It will be the same ad that you will have dealt with before, and we will discuss how it works shortly. It's about time we talked about the tests. There are 3 tests. 1 for DPS, 1 for healers, and 1 for tanks. In order to enter a test, a player must click one of the golden orbs that spawn. In 10-man, there will be 2 that spawn on either side of the back of the room. Only 2 players can be in a test at a time in 10-man, and once a player has finished their test, the orb will reappear and can be used again by somebody else to enter their test. Completing a test removes all corruption from the player and gives them the Purified buff, which makes tanks take less damage, healers heal for more, and DPS do more damage because they have no corruption. The DPS test requires them to kill ads. The higher the player's corruption, the more ads they must kill. Killing an ad removes some of the player's corruption and sends it across into the normal realm. The DPS must kill all the ads in order to complete the test and return to the normal realm. While in the test, the DPS needs to avoid the abilities the ads cast. Move away from the lines and dodge the frontal cone attack while you kill the ads from behind, as they have shields in front of them. The test must be done in 60 seconds or the player and all the ads will be teleported out and the player will still have corruption. Healers will have to heal themselves and 3 friendly NPCs against an ad called a Greater Corruption. The ad must be killed to complete the phase. The healer will have to dispel a dot called Lingering Corruption and avoid the muck on the ground. The healer can help DPS the ad down as well to speed it up. Once the ad dies, the healer gets returned to the normal realm. Tanks must survive for 60 seconds against a hard-hitting mob. The mob will use Titanic Smash, which is a frontal cone attack that needs to be avoided. It will also cast Hurl Corruption, which should be interrupted, and it will use Burst of Corruption and Piercing Corruption, which cannot be interrupted and deal a medium amount of damage. The tank will probably need at least some cooldowns, particularly self-heals, to survive this, but as long as hurl corruption is interrupted and Titanic Smash is avoided, it should be fine. The ad also applies a stacking debuff, so the damage will get higher. Now, I'm unsure whether it's an official bug or not, but during this test my interrupts would sometimes bug and would not cast. If that happens, you are probably going to wipe and have to start again. After 60 seconds of surviving, the tank gets sent back into the normal realm, and they should pick up the boss straight away, seeing as the other tank will probably have a decent amount of stacks of the debuff. Now to talk about the ads. Whether it's from DPS killing ads in their test or after the boss reaches 50% health, you will get ads. There are two types of ads. The first type comes only from the DPS test and is called Essence of Corruption. These throw balls of Shah energy at the boss, and each ball that hits the boss increases the boss's damage by 5% for 15 seconds, and this stacks. Standing between the ad and the boss will cause the player to take 100,000 shadow damage, but the boss won't gain a stack of the buff. These ads should simply be nuked down right away. Standing in the way of the bolt is probably not a good idea unless you have a defensive cooldown for it. The second type of ad comes from the boss reaching 50% health and every 10% after that, and is also sent from the DPS test. It is called Manifestation of Corruption. This ad needs to be picked up by the tank and killed. It will AoE the raid and melee the tank as well. When it's killed, it will leave a shadow orb on the ground which will AoE the entire raid for a huge amount of damage constantly until a player walks over it to pick it up. Picking it up adds 25 corruption to the player, but it gets rid of the damage effect. These shadowy orbs are the only way to gain corruption. The shadow orb cannot be picked up by a player who already has 100 corruption. I have heard that if more than one player stands on top of it at a time, they will all gain 25 corruption. We didn't think it wise to try and just had one person stand on it and everyone else stay away. This is the main reason your raid is going to need communication. You want the players who are just about to go into the test realm to pick up the shadow orb, as it will be cleansed soon anyway. Healers and tanks should take the shadow orbs rather than DPS, as lower corruption means more damage from the DPS. Players with no corruption should try to avoid picking them up if possible so that they can hold on to their buff, but if the group needs them to pick it up, then they will just have to do without the buff. It's more important that the orbs be picked up quickly than anything else. Keep in mind that any damage done to ads will also be done to the boss, so all DPS should be nuking ads as soon as they appear, all the time. Bloodlust should be used at around about 30 or 50% health on the boss. It is best to time it with as many DPS having no corruption as possible. When the boss is near 50% health, nobody should go into the test realm, as ads will be spawning as it is and the boss will be doing a lot of damage. So any additional ads will cause problems, and you want all your healers and tanks there to deal with the damage. When communicating, your group may want to decide on a name for the golden and shadow orbs to avoid confusion. They are both orbs, so perhaps calling the golden orbs portals and calling the shadow orbs orbs or puddles will help. What order you send players into the test realm is up to your group, though we sent 2 DPS, and then a tank and a DPS, and then the other tank and a DPS, and basically tried to get as many DPS with no corruption as possible for the extra damage, while having tanks with low corruption to soak up any corruption that appeared. If you choose to follow that type of rotation, the tank that will go first into the test realm should take the boss first, so that the other tank is free of stacks when they must take the boss. The Enrage is an instant wipe, so there is no leeway on this fight. I hope you found this guide helpful, and if you did, then please click that like button and post a comment, as it really helps me out. And of course, subscribe for more videos. Good luck and have fun.